a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
I wonder, how many cups of coffee have I drunk over the past 60 some odd years? I drank quite a lot of coffee in the Army. I was in the 49th Armor Division, but I got attached to the 2nd Armor Division in order to go to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin. One night at NTC, while guarding the Tactical Operations Center, I had the opportunity to practically drown in coffee. We were out in the desert playing war games. I was supposed to be the loader on an M1 tank, but I got royally screwed and I was assigned to the headquarters company. We had to support a bunch of officers and pencil pushers. Mostly it was in the form of guard duty and KP. The TOC had a whole bunch of M577s. The 577 is the Command Post Carrier, also known as the M577 Command Post Vehicle or Armored Command Post Vehicle. It's a variant of the M113, kind of a pregnant version of that. These things are tall and they had huge canvas tents that unfolded from the rear, and they connected to form one huge room for the folks running things to work in. At night, any light could be seen for miles. I had the pleasure and the honor of guarding these things in the middle of the night. 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were out there for a month. One night, as I wandered listlessly around the perimeter, I spotted light coming from the back of the TOC. The seam where the tents came together hadn't been properly connected. My first instinct was to leave it and hope the op force would sneak in and, well, never mind. I was never any good at shirking my duty, no matter how nasty or horrible it was. I strongly believed in the philosophy of embracing the suck. I moved the flaps around until I managed to cover the gap. As I did this, I noticed there was a silver bullet, a huge coffee maker, sitting right there by the gap. It was there so that the officers could drink coffee while they planned their strategies. The inside of the TOC was dark. They used red lights at night so that when you came and went from the inside, you wouldn't lose your night vision. I looked around at the folks working inside, and I noticed that none of them were paying any attention to the coffee maker, so I got out my canteen cup and I filled it. And then I had some coffee as I walked around the perimeter. Army cooks make horrible coffee. They dump the grounds into the water and then they simply boil it. That is no way to treat a cup of coffee, good or bad. But that's the Army way. Over the course of that night, I visited that flap every few minutes. It was cold and I was bored. I drank coffee and I spit out the loose grounds as I walked the perimeter for the entire shift. By sunup, I think I'd finished most of those 200 cups in that container by myself. You could probably have followed my trail around the edge of the TOC by the coffee grounds that were laying on top of the sand where I had been walking. Had it been Organic Man coffee, trike coffee, I might have passed out from a coffee overdose. 4501 McPherson for the best coffee in the universe. If you can't get here from there, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. I really want somebody out there to come up with an Annabelle Lee costume for the next Halloween. That creepy little girl from Trailer Trash Terrors would make a great costume. I don't know how it would look because I don't make Halloween costumes. Maybe Vic Hermanson, or maybe David Griffith, or JJ perhaps, or perhaps Father Mike or his son Josh the Deacon could brainstorm a bit, maybe during the next creation of the podcast Paranormal Rundown. I'm sure it will come up in the subject as to what would Annabelle Lee's costume look like and how would it be made. How about her voice? I don't see how any 7, 8, 9 year old girl could possibly in recreate that voice. It's just got something about it that you have to hear. I guess if the kid wearing the costume just simply stood there staring at the people with the candy, they would probably get nervous and hand over the whole bowl. I know I would. Maybe they could make a recording that came with the costume. The recording of Annabelle Lee's voice saying, trick or treat, or else. Something like that. That would be so cool. I hope they do come up with something for next year. I've already started planning next year's yard display. I saw the movie Jeepers Creepers many years ago, the original. I tried watching the sequels, but I couldn't stand them. The creeper was the thing doing all the nastiness. I talked about giant bat creatures on February 14th, 2020, and then humanoid bat creatures on May 12th, 2023. I just visited Johnson High School to tell them some scary stories and get them ready for Halloween. One of the stories I told was on the creatures seen all over Laredo, including the neighborhood where they all lived. The movie was kind of inspired by a true event. Like many writers only having the opening scene in their mind, the movie's opening was from an event from 1990. It was Easter Sunday, April 15th, 1990, when Ray and Marie Thornton were on a weekend drive on Snow Prairie Road, which is about 12 miles outside of Coldwater, Michigan. As they drove along, they were playing a game where each would look at a license plate of a passing vehicle and then come up with a word based on the letters or the numbers of the plate. Ray glanced at his rearview mirror and he saw an old beat up green Chevy van that seemed to be driving aggressively as it was overtaking them. Well, the van wasn't driving aggressively, the driver of the van was. It got right up on their back bumper, and it did the old surge forward and then back off just a bit thing. It did this a few times before finally pulling to the left lane and flying by as if the driver were about to burst. Have you ever had to go so badly that you thought you might explode? That kind of thing. The van driver went by and then he pulled in front so close that Ray had to step on the brake pedal. Marie saw the license plate, which began with the letters G and a Z. She said, "Geez, that guy's in a big hurry." As the van disappeared from view, they got on with their trip. As they were approaching a small community, they saw an old abandoned schoolhouse on the side of the road. They passed the building. They saw that same van was now parked on the side of the building. Marie, not having to watch the road, took a closer look as they went by. The crazy driver was walking along the side of the van, holding what looked like a blood-soaked sheet. This was just too weird, so they began discussing perhaps they should call the police or the highway patrol or somebody and tell them there's something weird going on. Once beyond the school building, they were still wondering if they should call the police or not when the van came flying up behind them once again. The van got right up behind them and then it stayed there, way too close for comfort. The van stayed on the rear bumper for the next several miles. The Thorntons worried what the driver pursuing them would do and what they should do about it. I know what I would have done, but I wasn't there. The couple turned off the highway, and the van pulled to the side of the road just beyond where they had pulled off. Ray wanted to get a better look at that license plate so they would have more information for the police. So he turned around and he drove back to the highway. As they were approaching the green van, they noticed the driver was kneeling by the front bumper, doing something with the license plate. As they passed, they could see he was holding another license plate in his hand. It appeared that he was switching the plates, so their getting his license plate, well, that was no longer a thing. The Thorntons passed the van, and as they did, they could see in through the driver's door. The interior of the van was covered in blood. It was definitely time to call the police. They drove back to that small community to look for a payphone. Cell phones were out there, but very few people could afford them. The old schoolhouse was the first building they came to, and so they just stopped for a few seconds just for a quick look. They could see the bloody sheet was partially stuffed into a hole. Well, they left the school and they managed to find a payphone at a nearby gas station. Ray called the Michigan State Police and then he told them what they had seen. Surprisingly, the police were already looking for the green van. The driver was a wanted man. It's good to be wanted, but not by the police. The driver's name was Dennis Depew, and I simply have to say it. Un skunk Depew. If you don't get that one, you don't watch enough Warner Brothers cartoons. Depew was wanted for questioning in regards to his wife, who was missing. Dennis Henry Depew was born in 1943 in Michigan, and he stayed in his home state as he grew up. 1971, he married Marilyn, who became a popular high school counselor in Coldwater. The couple had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. With time, Depew's paranoid and controlling ways had begun to emerge. After years of marriage, Marilyn realized that he was not the man that she wanted to be married with, nor somebody she wanted to be around. He was making her life a living nightmare. They were separated, and Depew moved into a small apartment. Once they were no longer living together, Depew began accusing Maryland of turning his kids against him. He would rant and rave about all the perceived injuries caused by his no longer wife. 1989, Maryland filed for divorce, telling her attorney that Depew was trying to control every decision in her life. Now I've got a cat sitting in front of me. He was also telling the kids all kinds of bad things that he figured that she was doing to him. Depew had made no claims for the house, but he did maintain his small office in the garage. On Easter Sunday, 1990, Depew arrived at the family home to pick up two of the kids. The younger daughter, Julie, had refused to go with Depew that day. He went inside to get the other two. Well, he became angry whenever the son, Scott, was stalling, as if he didn't want to go with the father either. When Marilyn tried talking to Depew, his anger increased, and he began shouting accusations, saying that she was turning the kids against him. He grabbed his wife, and she took steps to defend herself. Too many folks out there don't know how to fight. Too many people don't know how to defend themselves properly. They should teach that in school. It's not that difficult, but they don't want to because they're afraid that folks might actually defend themselves, I guess. As the horrified children looked on, Depew pushed Marilyn down the stairs. Once she had tumbled to the bottom, Depew began beating her. The kids ran to defend their mother, but he refused to stop. The oldest girl, Jennifer, ran outside to the neighbor's house to call the police. After way too long, Depew stopped to catch his breath. His wife wasn't moving, so he lifted her off the floor and carried her outside. He told his two children that were still there he was going to take her to the hospital. He drove away, but he never arrived at the medical facility. The police began searching for the missing woman and the man who had abducted her. At the time, they were hoping that Marilyn was still alive. The Thorntons gave the police all the details on what they had seen. A forensics team sealed off the abandoned school, which was now a crime scene. They found tracks that matched Dupree's van. The evidence indicated that Dupree had probably killed his ex-wife, which was confirmed the next day when a highway worker discovered Marilyn's body, shot once in the back of the head, lying near a deserted road. This road was midway between the schoolhouse and her home. Over the next several weeks, Dennis Depew sent a series of bizarre, rambling letters to friends and family attempting to justify Marilyn's murder. 17 letters were postmarked from Virginia, Iowa, and Oklahoma, in which he ranted over her tricks and lies, writing how he had lost his wife, his children, and his home, and now he was too old to try starting over. It was all her fault that he had to murder her. On the evening of March 20th, 1991, a Dallas, Texas woman returned home. She discovered her boyfriend's van was parked in her driveway. Her boyfriend, Hank Queen, told her that his mother was very sick and he needed to drive back to his home state, and could she please make him some food for the trip. As she was working in the kitchen, Hank sat in the living room watching Unsolved Mysteries, which was playing on the TV. Once she had finished, Hank turned off the TV, gathered up his belongings, his personal items, and headed out the door. Depew took off immediately, fearing that one of his girlfriend's friends was going to recognize him from the TV show and drop a dime on him. State and county law enforcement had already begun receiving phone calls from people who recognized his image, which was shown at the end of the broadcast. They also received information on the fake license plate number that appeared on his van. Depew managed to drive into Louisiana, where the state troopers spotted him. He led them on a 15-mile high-speed chase into Mississippi. The Mississippi State Police were waiting for him with a roadblock. Depew broke through the roadblock as officers fired at him and his vehicle. Depew fired back at them. Both rear tires were blown out. Depew continued driving on the rims for a few miles, eventually coming to a stop. The officers approached the van, only to find Depew dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The opening scene from the movie Jeepers Creepers was loosely based on this event. The villain in Jeepers Creepers has been described as being a giant bat creature. It has leathery black skin and wings. He wears a wide-brimmed hat and a long black coat. If you haven't seen the movie, well, the creeper looks like a very bad dream. People have seen something all over the place that, when asked, say it reminded them exactly of the creeper. Back in 1999, a guy named Ed was driving to Joplin, Missouri. It was about 10 a.m. It was 10 at night, and he was with his cousin, Bill. As the two drove south along I-49, almost to their destination, they saw a tall figure standing well off the side of the road up ahead. From a distance, they both said this man looked like a gargoyle. Then it looked more that way than a human. But that's just too weird. There are no such things as gargoyles. They figured that it had to have been a trick of the light, or the lack thereof. The man was about 6.5 feet to maybe 7 feet tall. He was dressed in a long black coat, which was unbuttoned down the front. It nearly reached the ground. His skin looked black and leathery. There was no hair anywhere. As the headlights began to illuminate the figure, the idea of him looking like a gargoyle changed to him actually being such a creature. As they got a bit closer, the creature began moving, angling towards the road, where, in just moments, their car was going to be. The thing looked directly at the two witnesses, and its face had a flattened look with eyes set deep in its face. This creature had wings that they hadn't noticed before, unfurling from its back. It was almost to the road and almost right in front of them when it leaped into the air and flew right over the hood of their car. It vanished into the night as the car continued into Joplin. Just having seen something otherworldly, they talked about what it might have been And Bill said, "It looked like that creature from that movie. You know the movie, Jeepers Creepers." Ed had to agree. A woman, I will call her Elizabeth, and not to be mistaken for the Elizabeth from Trailer Trash Terrors. If you haven't listened yet, you should go pay Vic a visit and find out about a woman who says she is hundreds of years old and she drinks blood to stay alive. It's quite a story, and it just might be true. Now, the other Elizabeth, the one that didn't drink blood, well, as far as we know, was driving home one evening in the mid 1980s at about 3 a.m. She worked in town, and she didn't say which one, and she lived in a rural part of Oregon. Ahead in the road, she saw something that looked like it was floating just above the pavement. It was coming right at her vehicle. She thought maybe it was a giant owl in search of dinner. She slowed down, not wanting to have an owl-sized dent in her car. The closer she got, the bigger this thing became. It was soon as big as a man. The creature was looking more and more like the creeper from that movie. You know, the one. The body was all black, and it had huge wings. When it was almost close enough for a definitive look, the thing vanished. This was followed by the car bumping up and over something in the road. Elizabeth was startled, and she slammed on the brakes. Then she rationalized. There was no way she could have seen, let alone run over, the creeper. She looked in both side mirrors. Then she turned and looked out the back window. In the rear window, right behind her car, she saw a set of hands reaching up from below. This was followed by a set of huge wings, then a face. The first thing that caught her attention was the eyes. They were glowing bright orange. The face looked human, only the skin was all black. Now, only a few feet away, Elizabeth could see the veins running through the leathery wings, like giant bat wings that were standing on her rear bumper. It clomb up the back of the car and onto the roof. She could hear it scraping along the top, moving towards the hood. Before getting to the windshield, the thing fell to the side of the vehicle, landing on its back on the ground. Elizabeth could hear it flapping its wings, trying to right itself. She was torn between hitting the gas and getting out of there, or staying to try to figure out what this thing was. The monster flipped onto its stomach, got its legs under it, stood, and moved away towards the trees. Halfway to the trees, the thing tried flapping its wings, but it didn't get airborne. It vanished into the woods. Once home, Elizabeth tried searching for giant bats or anything like them and found, you guessed it, images of the creeper. This answered her questions as to what, but now she was wondering how and why. A family was driving along a road in Las Milpas, Texas. The town, not the restaurants. The town is near McAllen and near Far, Texas. We always say, once you pass McAllen, you've gone too far. I'll bet the people living in Far are sick of that joke. It's FARR. There were two women in the front seat of a pickup. They were sisters, and they had a bunch of kids in the rear seat. Maybe too many for the number of seat belts. One lone kid was in the bed. Up ahead, the driver saw some kind of a humanoid looking creature. It was moving along the side of the road, flapping enormous wings. It was huge, too big to be any kind of a bird that they knew of. The driver took her foot off the gas and just stared at this thing as it was trying to take off. As it was trying to get airborne, everybody in the pickup began to panic, thinking this creature just might attack them, especially that kid in the back of the truck. This led to a bunch of screaming and crying, which attracted the thing's attention. Instead of trying to fly, the creature turned and ran into the thick brush on the side of the road. Everyone agreed the creature had looked like a man with huge wings, like that creature from the movie. During their discussion, one of them said their other aunt had seen something just like this under the Far Reynosa Bridge, which goes into Mexico. Their aunt had said this thing had jumped out in front of her car as she was driving. She was so shook up, she went to the bridge and reported it to the customs agents. They didn't seem surprised by her story. They acted as if they may have seen it as well. In Webb County, there are 4 international bridges from Mexico to the United States. The 3 of which are in Laredo, and one that sits 20 miles northwest of town. Bridge number 1 is for pedestrians and vehicle traffic. Bridge number 2 is just vehicle traffic and people being returned to Mexico. Bridge number 3, also known as the Columbia Bridge, is 20 miles northwest of town, and it is only for vehicle traffic. Number 4, also known as the World Trade Bridge, is commercial vehicles only. In 2006, at about 3 a.m., a customs agent at the Columbia Bridge was working his post when he spotted a man walking north along the side of the bridge. The man looked odd, dressed in an old-style coat that hung down to the ground at his feet. On occasion, smugglers have walked to the very edge of the bridge and then bolted across vehicle lanes to gain illegal entry, carrying unknown contraband. Thinking this man might try something, the agent began moving closer to him. When the agent was about 15 feet from the man in the coat, the man leaped straight into the air. It looked as if he flew away into the night sky. There were several bridge personnel sitting in the building right next to the bridge, looking out the windows. Many of them saw what had happened. They all had a fairly good look at this man and what he did. Once the custom agent had collected himself and he walked back to his post, the people who had seen this interaction all asked him what had happened. Several wanted to know if the man had actually flown away. The agent was at a loss as to what to tell them. 2008, or maybe it was in 2009, a customs agent was working bridge number 1 in Laredo. He spotted a man walking across the bridge from Mexico. Foot traffic is not allowed on this bridge, only vehicles. Correction. That was bridge 3, I believe. Wondering what this guy was doing, the agent walked towards him to ask if just maybe there was some kind of a problem. Maybe he had broken down and he needed a wrecker. Just maybe there had been some kind of a medical emergency. As the agent grew close to the walker, he noticed this guy looked like he was covered in mud. He looked as if he'd been rolling around under the bridge. The walker began to open his coat. It was full length and it hung down to his feet. As the coat opened, the man stopped walking, leaped into the air, and flew away into the night. This agent was so shook up by his encounter that he was forced to seek professional help to try to understand what he had just seen. March 10th, 2020 at 3:30 p.m., a waitress saw the creeper in a field between San Marcos and Bastrop, Texas on Highway 21. It was floundering around on the ground as if it had caught something to eat, or perhaps something had caught it. February 8th, 2021 at 8:30 p.m., the creeper was seen in Laredo by 3 different people. It made an eerie screeching sound, which they said sounded like a woman in intense pain, and it was flapping its wings, which they could hear the sound of the wind as it was being beaten. A Garland, Texas family, a father, mother, and son, saw a huge winged creature. This was accompanied by some weird lights in the sky. This wasn't a one-off, but it happened 3 different times. The first was in May 2020. They saw a huge winged humanoid that reminded them of the creeper. It was flying through the air about 50 feet above their home. They all watched as it went from horizon to horizon in just seconds. The next few days, they all saw weird lights, like glowing orbs in the sky, mostly following the same track as the creeper. A few months later, they saw the creeper once more. The husband and wife had heard a weird screeching sound coming from the end of the block. They went to investigate. Maybe some animal had been injured, or worse, maybe one of their neighbors. As they walked, the creeper popped up above the trees in front of them and flew away. In November, they had their last sighting. The thing flew overhead, and they all heard some kind of a mechanical sound, like some kind of a machinery was running, but in a very bad way. I've heard this several reports of people hearing what they describe as a mechanical sound, a kind of like huge machinery or some kind of a huge metal door being opened and closed. Folks believe that this is the opening and closing of a portal. The sky trumpets are also sometimes described as sounding mechanical. Just maybe the creeper is a being that looks like the creeper from the movies, but it's only passing through. Sightings are simply that, only visual, and this is not something we have to worry about. November 26th, 2021, 4:30 a.m., a witness saw the creeper flying over Las Milpas once again. The Black Plague of 2020 was just picking up steam, and we were all being told to stay home for those 3 long weeks. Those were the 3 longest weeks I've ever had. The witness thought of all the stories going on around about witches and monsters seen in the area. This one looked like the creeper more than anything else. Telling her friends about what she had seen, she found out that her friend had seen it as well only a few days earlier. As they began asking around, they found out that 10 other people that they knew had also seen the creeper flying around Las Milpas. December 18th, 2022 at 4 a.m., a witness saw the creeper in Rio Grande City, which is about 40 miles west from McAllen. He was sitting on the front porch of his home when he saw this huge thing flying along the horizon. It creeped him out watching as it flew along, not seeming to realize it was being observed. The witness said he was more than happy to see the thing and to know that it hadn't seen him. October 19th, 2023, at around 6:30, a witness saw the creeper near Mercedes, Texas, which is about 20 miles east of McAllen. Here in Laredo, David was driving home after having a few beers. He said he was a little tiny bit lightheaded, but he wasn't drunk. As he passed the cemeteries, he turned north onto McPherson. As he was moving along up the road, his pickup bounced as if he had hit something or something had hit him. He looked in his side mirror to see if there was something there. Then he glanced in his rear view mirror. In the bed of his truck sat a huge creature. It looked like a giant bat, like the thing from that movie. The skin was shiny black and its elbows were touching both sides across the bed of the truck. David screamed and he hit the brakes. This caused the creature to slide forward and hit up against the back window of the cab. The creature was now just inches from the back of his head. The sudden impact caused him to hit the gas. The acceleration made the creature tumble backwards and bounce over the tailgate. David did his best to get as far away as he could without breaking too many laws. One person seeing this giant bat creature in Laredo, and maybe he'd had far more beer than he had said, well, it gets you to wondering. However, Judith, who lives on the south side of Laredo, near Highway 83, her and her friend Daniela were sitting outside her home on the tailgate of a pickup truck. Daniela was facing over Judith's shoulder towards a tree in the yard, but she had her eyes closed because she was laughing about something that Judith had said. They caught movement from the corner of her eye. She stopped laughing and said, "Shoot, did you see that?" Up in the tree was a huge creature. It was all black and its skin was hairless and shiny, like it was made out of latex. It had huge wings like a bat. The shape brought to mind the thing from that movie. Judith's mouth had just dropped open and she sat there and said, "Jeepers creepers." The creature flew right over the two and landed in a tree across the street from them. Daniela had jumped to her feet and ran to the cab of the truck, but Judith was frozen in place, sitting there staring at this creature across the street from them. Daniela had to come back to help her off the tailgate and pretty much guide her to the front door of her home. Once Judith was safely inside, Daniela drove away. 2012, on the south side of Laredo, somewhere around Cielito Lindo, a witness saw a huge bat-like creature flying overhead. It was too far to get a really good look at it, but it definitely was not a bird. It had bat wings, and it flew in that weird swooping way that bats do. The creature disappeared off into the distance. 2016, somebody saw a giant bat creature flying over the Laredo College South Campus, which is just a short distance from Cielito Lindo. This took place right after sundown. Once again, the witness was certain this was no bird. He was also certain it was the creeper. People up north and around Chicago have seen what they describe as a giant bat with a human body and a face that looks like something out of a bad dream flying around. Some say that this is Mothman, the same creature that had terrorized Point Pleasant back in 1966 and 67. People have also reported seeing this creature standing in the bushes on the side of the road to on the side of Espejo Molina Road. I'm thinking espresso coffee. Es- Espejo Molina Road runs from 83 South past Rio Bravo to El Cenizo. It's dark at night, and it's kind of a lonely drive. In 2019, several people driving along this road reported seeing a huge creature standing just off the side of the road. They all said it reminded them of that thing from the movie. Espresso. Es, now I'm going to try it. Espejo Espresso. Yeah, they kind of sound. We should call it Espresso Road instead. Late one evening, several years ago, Juan was riding his bike along the river in Rio Bravo. He thought he heard something splashing around in the water, and it sounded big. He stopped and looked to his right, trying to see what he thought was going to be a very big fish. Just a few feet from where he sat, the water was boiling, and a dark thing was coming up out of it. A huge black monster came up from the river and began flapping its giant wings. It went up into the sky and flew away, heading west. Juan said he was glad the thing was going into Mexico. He thought about what he had seen and he said it was the creeper. New Braunfels is midpoint between San Antonio and San Marcos. Folks go there to play in the river because of the rapids and the naturally made water slides. It has a population of about 90,000 people. During one of the school breaks, John was bored and so he was looking for something to do. It was late, and he thought maybe he should call Ray and they could go hang out at the Camel Park together. He called Ray, telling him to meet him up at the park, and he snuck out the door and walked to the playground. It took Ray a few minutes to get there because he lived farther away. They started walking around with nothing in mind, no particular place to go, other than being at home. Yes, that's a Chuck Berry song. As they were approaching the picnic area, they saw a man sitting on one of the tables. Actually, he was sitting on top of the table with his legs pulled up on either side of his body. The two boys thought this must be some homeless guy who was high or drunk or maybe just crazy. They said what sounded like a woman screaming came from the man on the table. Then he stood and up and up a bit more. This guy must have been about 8 feet tall. He stood there for a second or two, then spread his enormous wings. The wings were way too big for any kind of a bird or human. They covered the cement pad that the table was sitting on. Both kids immediately thought of the creature from that movie. The two boys decided it was time to be someplace else, someplace uninhabited by winged monsters. They took off running. As they ran, they could hear the sound of those huge wings flapping, slowly getting closer behind them. Once they were out of the park, they stopped at the first house they came to and they hammered on the door, yelling to be let in. The owner of the house yelled at them to get off the porch and to go away. He must have seen the movie A Clockwork Orange. If you haven't seen the movie Clockwork Orange, well, you don't run in the same circles that I do. The boys thought the thing was still around somewhere, and so they ran to the next house and began pounding on the door. When nobody would let them in, they ran to the third house and did the same thing. Within a few minutes, the police came flying down the street, lights and siren going. The boys ran to the unit and tried to tell the two officers their story. The two officers listened. One of them kept looking up in the sky and looking over his shoulder as if he were expecting the creeper to come flying towards them at any second. After running wants and warrants on the two boys, they were sent on their way back home with a warning to not run around at night knocking on people's doors. A few folks who look into weird things, like I do, have made a connection between the creeper and the Mothman. To me, the descriptions don't really line up that well, other than both creatures have really big wings and they like to chase people. The Mothman looks like a huge bird, actually, while the creeper looks like a man with wings and black leathery skin. There have been many sightings reported in and around Chicago where the Mothman has been seen several times. Why the witnesses all say it was the Mothman instead of the creeper, I can't say. I think it's because some of the first reports were of something that did look like the Mothman. And so other people, seeing a huge winged monster, just go with the first report, not wanting to think that there could possibly be two flying creatures running around the countryside. Some of these sightings go back before Point Pleasant was being talked about. In early winter 1957, Gerald Therese reported seeing a winged creature with the body of a large man while he was out hunting in Braidwood, Illinois. In the fall of 1959, David Ramos reported an encounter with a shadowy winged humanoid near North Branch off the Chicago River. He later went on to become a police officer. 1966, the people in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, began reporting seeing a huge bird that was changed into being called the Mothman by the local newspaper editor. Many of the sightings did say the creature had glowing red eyes, but it did not have black, shiny skin, and it didn't really look like a man with wings. October 27th, 1969, Floyd Hancock said he had been abducted from his home as a young child for an indeterminate amount of time by a tall, winged humanoid being that eventually returned him to his home. In or around mid-June 1976, a man reported being attacked while in his vehicle by a winged black figure with glowing red eyes in Waukegan, Illinois. 1980, a man reported an encounter with what became known as the Bat Squatch. This creature was described as standing 9 feet tall, having yellow eyes and a dog-like muzzle. Blue fur, sharp teeth, and bird-like feet. It had leathery bat-like wings that spanned about 50 feet. The first encounter was near Mount St. Helens, the one that later blew up. The witness said it looked like a flying primate. 1987, a man in rural Indiana reported a sighting of a human like creature flying overhead with glowing red eyes. 1997, a separate witness reported seeing a frightening winged gargoyle in the Rock Island in Naperville, Illinois. 1999, a woman, her husband, and a friend of theirs reported a flying red-eyed gargoyle in Rockford, Illinois. I've been through Rockford many times. In the summer of 2000, two witnesses reported a weird winged entity at the Gresham Dam in Indiana. July 2020, a man reported seeing a 6 to 7 foot tall, very big bat that was also human like while he was on his break from his job as an air traffic controller at the Chicago O'Hare International Airport. August 2020, a man reported seeing a gargoyle with little horns on its heads in Itasca, Illinois. Some of these reports are just one or two lines long, and the witness either didn't tell more about what he had seen, or the person taking the report didn't jot everything down. But this is all I could find on some of these reports. In October 1st, 2000, La Prensa newspaper out of Mexico City published a report from a commercial airline pilot who told of his sighting of a flying man that was witnessed by him and his co-pilot as they descended into Mexico City Airport. June 17th, 2005. Horacio Roquette and his sister witnessed a tall, dark humanoid creature floating above a building, and it was looking at them with what they felt like a threatening manner. The incident took place in Unidad Abitz. Oh boy. It was in Platero, Mexico. It's one of those words that I practiced saying about 30 times, and now that I'm looking at the camera, I can't pronounce it. You try it sometime. On May 8th, 2021, a woman reported a sighting of a large black creature gliding over Roosevelt Road by Elmhurst, Illinois. July 22nd, 2001, there were three witnesses that reported a security response to what appeared to be a red-eyed, winged humanoid flying around the Chicago O'Hare International Airport. August 5th, 2021, a woman said she had seen a black, 7-foot tall, winged humanoid with glowing yellow eyes while working at the Wisconsin State Fair in Milwaukee. And I've been to that state fair a few times. Here's the really bad thing. I've been to the Milwaukee State Fair 3 or 4 times. I've been to the Texas State Fair once. Yes, I think that was after Big Tex caught fire and burned up. August 5th, 2021. Oh, I just did that one. December 30th, 2021, a man said he and two co-workers saw 3 black, red-eyed winged creatures while working near a hangar at the O'Hare Airport. March 5th, 2022, a woman said her and her friend encountered a creature with bright red eyes and big black body while parked at a construction site near the airport, the same one. Did you notice how many reports there were from around the Chicago airport? This was just the ones that I found while looking for other reports. It sounds more like the creeper to me than the Mothman. I probably skipped quite a few simply because I was only scanning the reports trying to find anything that sounded like the creeper as opposed to the Mothman. June 21st, 2001, two witnesses reported a man with wings flying over the Kinnickinnick River in Milwaukee. A lot of these names are Indian names from long ago, and the way the Indians said the word and the way that the white people wrote it down, not necessarily the same. September 8th, 2001, a woman reported four red-eyed winged humanoids flying over her home in Berwyn, Illinois. 2006, we had that witch report seen flying from one mountain to another in Monterrey, Mexico. A UFO group was having a meeting when one of them spotted the flying humanoid. Anna Luisa Sid managed to catch the flying being on a video, which immediately went viral. Once she had posted the video, others began coming forward with their accounts of encounters of a witch in Monterey. Now, Miss Sid never called it a witch. She said it was a UFO. And, well, she was the member of the UFO group. The hotel where they were having their meeting, I've stayed there a couple times. It's a real nice hotel. And it's not that expensive. The thing in the video is all black and it is shaped like a human. There's no way to say if it was a witch or the creeper. Calling it a UFO is appropriate since it is unidentified and it is flying and it is some kind of an object. Now, yes, I know the guys on Fact or Faked. They filled a trash bag with balloons or something, or they used some way to say, oh, look, yeah, we recreated this thing. But just because you can recreate it doesn't mean that's what it was. 2011, a witness named Ashley had a strange encounter. She was walking down a street with her boyfriend at about 3 a.m. They saw what she described as a creature, very similar in appearance to the Jersey Devil. If you look at the same images, some of the images of the Jersey Devil, and you look at a gargoyle or the creeper, the thing Ashley saw was flying very low to the ground. She could hear its huge wings flapping. The creature she saw was about 7.5 feet tall, with a torso similar to that of a man with very broad shoulders. When she saw it, she screamed, which caused the creature to disappear, as if it had simply blinked out of existence. 2017, a story appeared out of Spain of a gargoyle-like creature sighting. A man named Alex Nisarek told how he was awoken one night in September 2010 by what he said vaguely looked like a dog with wings. The sighting happened at 1 in the morning in the Santa Maria del Aguila in Spain. He heard a strange, spine-tingling noise that resembled a woman shrieking, which was outside of his open bedroom window. He looked out the window only to find a bizarre winged creature approaching from several feet away. It was walking along the ledge of the building. Alex said the creature was large with thick, short beak and a stretched head, an elongated head. Its body was bulky and kind of a pinkish color. It didn't seem to have any front legs. Its wings were curved with a span of about 8 or 9 feet. It had a long, thin tail, and its movements were slow and heavy, like it was struggling to get up into the air. This gargoyle-looking creature took off flying into the night sky. Why do I have such a hard time pronouncing gargoyle? I saw that movie too, and well, I kind of wished I hadn't. People have seen Bigfoot and Dogman together at the same time. On some occasions, these two cryptids are fighting, while on others, they seem to be working together. I know this sounds odd and unbelievable, but there have been lots of unbelievable things happening, and sometimes you do have to keep an open mind. The boys in the white lab coats are saying what people are seeing is a crane, a giant owl, or some other big bird, and we're all too dense to know the difference. The pair on Expedition X have come to the conclusion that all sightings of the Jersey Devil, the Van Meter monster, and just about every flying creature was a bat. Now, people are apparently too stupid to know the difference between a giant flying monster and a bat. What can you say? Of course, there is the Hollywood effect. You've got people performing in front of a camera, and the folks out in Hollywood have an idea on how things should be done. If you don't scream and holler and throw your hands in the air and run around in circles, well, they don't want to talk to you. A few other investigators and podcasters have linked the creeper to other unexplained things. Things like UFOs or shadow beings. Most sightings are very brief, and the witnesses don't have time to process fully what they're seeing. If you see something that looks like a man up in the sky, you might not have time to identify it as being either Mothman or a gargoyle or the creeper. You're seeing something that isn't a bird, it isn't a plane, and it sure isn't Superman. If it has glowing red or orange eyes, your attention is going to be frozen on that and you won't see what the body actually looks like. Thinking about gargoyle sightings from all over Europe, these date back hundreds of years. Mothman only came into the public lexicon after Point Pleasant was publicized. The creeper was unknown until 2001 when the movie put the image into people's minds. Just because some Hollywood type or some writer on creepypasta comes up with a creature doesn't mean that they came up with all of the historical sightings. They didn't invent this creature, they simply put it down on paper. The rake was seen for years before that article had come out. It just went by different names. The creeper sounds so much like other beings seen throughout history, creatures that haunted man and hunted him. Once we come up with a name for something, doesn't mean that something came into being at that same time. Perhaps the creature was once known as a gargoyle, and the guy who wrote the screenplay used it for his inspiration. What keeps me awake at night is knowing people all over the world are seeing these things, and so far, we don't know how to kill one or even defend ourselves if one should come at us. Are they bulletproof? Will a 9mm take them down, or do you need something bigger like a shotgun? Hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and I hear my lawn guy is blowing the leaves around, so I'm going to call it a night. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Thing.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight. in the hanging tree.